Bridging Island Plan. My name is Keith Holland. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and a Chartered Surveyor. On my left is my colleague, Mr. Jeff Salter, who's also a Chartered Town Planner.
Good morning, everybody.
We've been appointed to examine the plan and prepare a report for the Minister. We're required to consider the island plan on the following basis. Is it based on adequate evidence? Does it adopt an appropriate strategy for sustainable development? Is it capable of delivery? And does it contribute to the Government of Jersey's wider strategic objectives? We're assisted by Mrs. Helen Wilson, who I'm sure most of you know. She's sitting at the back of the room. She's an impartial officer. She reports to us, and she's basically responsible for the overall administration of the examination. If you have any queries, Mrs. Wilson will be very happy to help you. Just a few housekeeping points which we must cover. Please switch off your mobile phones. Apologies for the lift not working. COVID measures that we've taken have been published. Masks are not compulsory, they're optional. We would advise people to take a lateral flow test before they come, if possible. We will be doing that every morning before we start.
Negative.
And they proved negative this morning, thank goodness. Fire exits, the most sensible exit is get out is through that one, because these doors will be locked if the fire alarm goes off. Out of those doors onto the green space that you can see outside above the stairs. We'll be sitting roughly from 10 o'clock to roughly 1 o'clock. If necessary, we'll have some breaks in between, and then in the afternoon we'll sit from 2 till roughly 5 o'clock, possibly a bit beyond 5 if we've got to a stage where we can complete a session. Please sign the attendance register, and if you've been listed as a participant, you'll be given a nameplate, which when you have found your seat, could you please make sure your nameplates are facing us so that we know who you are, and when you want to speak, you put your nameplates up, Toblerones as we call them, put them upright, and then we know that you would want to speak. Normally we would go around the room introducing ourselves and people around the room. Not really sensible this time, because people are going to be coming and joining the table and leaving the table depending on the particular session. So can I please ask people, if you're not introduced from the chair, if you could simply say who you are before you start speaking, please. The microphones, if you want to speak, you need to press the green button on the microphone, and that will then allow you to speak. The sessions are being recorded, and there is live streaming, so please bear that in mind when you are talking. As far as the sessions are concerned, sometimes Mr. Salter and I will sit together as we are this morning. Sometimes just one of us will be running the sessions, depending on what background reading and work that we've done. This is really important. I'd like to stress in the strongest terms that I can that these hearings are not intended to be situations where you can repeat your representation, where you can tell us what you've already put in writing. We know that. We've read all the representations. We are assuming that everybody who takes part in these proceedings will have done the same and read all the relevant material. So we will be very robust about stopping people who want to repeat points. Well, I've fallen down already. We will stop people who want to repeat what they've already put in writing. We simply can't spend 3 or 4 months here listening to people tell us what they've already put in writing. And that will apply to both sides, to the states as well as to the people who've made representations. The purpose of the hearings is for us to probe what you've told us and to check out any things that we're uncertain about or to raise any queries that we have. Obviously, if you believe that we've misinterpreted what you're saying, clearly you can explain that to us and tell us why you think we've got it wrong. So the hearings will be based around questions that we have, and it'll be an informal discussion, but led via the questions that we have about the representations that you've made. Detailed guidance about the procedure is available. It has been published. If you have any queries about the procedure, please consult that guidance first. In the first instance, if you're still confused, still unhappy about things, talk to Mrs. Wilson and she'll be able to help you with those things. As far as the morning is concerned, we're going to start with the Minister, and we're very pleased to welcome the Minister. He's going to do a short introduction for us. And following that, we're going to move into talking about the broad strategic elements of the plan. Three headings there, really. Strategic proposals. These are about the further work that is going to be needed when a more long-term plan is produced. We won't be dealing with the Marine Spatial Plan this morning. Our views are that that's best dealt with under the Natural Environment section, which Mr. Salter will actually be running. Then we've got the strategic policies, 7 high-level policies that have been produced in the plan, and then a discussion about places, 5 policies that deal with different parts of the island. Please bear in mind this morning we're dealing with broad strategic issues, and matters of detail will be picked up in the later thematic sessions. Does everybody follow what we're going to be doing this morning? Thank you very much. Right, Minister, thank you very much.
Good morning.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. That's very helpful and much appreciated. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to start with the strategic proposals. These are the matters which have been identified where further work is needed before a longer-term plan can be produced. They're very straightforward. We don't have a lot of questions about them, but we do have a few. Most of the submissions that have been made are about the issue of whether it's sensible to produce a bridging plan at this stage. And we are very conscious, and everybody can be assured that we are well aware of the level of feeling about this issue. Most people who've made representations about these strategic issues have been talking about whether it is wise to have a bridging island plan in advance of a firm policy for population and migration for the island. Some people say it would have been better to do nothing at all at this stage. Some people say you should only plan for a natural increase in population, which is put at about 100 people per year on the island. Some people say you should simply update the existing plan. Some people say you should have a plan, but you shouldn't allocate any land for any development in the plan. So we are well aware of the range of views and the strength of opinion that's been expressed. Looking at it from the state's point of view, of course, they have a legal requirement for a plan, and they're well aware of the need to address some of the critical issues, particularly things like affordable housing, which the Minister was talking about. It's a bridging plan, a shorter-term plan, because of the uncertainties caused by Brexit and, of course, the coronavirus outbreak. So we do understand both sides of the position. Can I just ask somebody from the state side, please? Reading your October 20 migration control policy document, you're talking about having a population policy in place fairly shortly. Where have we got to on that?
Okay, you can hear me without feedback. Many will know that the work continues. It's led by the Assistant Chief Minister, Deputy Roland Hewlin. A public consultation recently took place to inform work. It was due to come back to the Assembly by the end of this year. I'm not able to confirm if that will happen or if it will be early in the new year, but that work continues and will be brought to the States Assembly in the coming months.
Can you just introduce yourself,
Sorry,
please?
apologies. My name is Steve Skelton. I'm the Group Director for Strategy and Innovation.
Right, okay, thank you. So the issue, of course, will be when you come to do your next, the island plan, the longer-term plan. I suspect a lot of the discussion will be about the policy. The objections now that you don't have a policy. As soon as you have a policy, no doubt there'll be some interesting discussions. Right. The National Trust. Can I come to you, Mrs. Taylor, please? We're just looking for some clarification from you, because you have, you're one of the people, one of the organisations which have said that really it's a problem producing a plan without a population policy. And what you've said is that you think that it's impossible to ascertain how much land should be allocated for housing in the absence of a policy. So we're not quite sure what you're saying. Are you saying they shouldn't have bothered to produce the plan at all? Or are you saying they should have produced a plan without any numbers in it and without any housing sites allocated?
Thank you, sir. By way of introduction, I'm Karen Taylor, a Chartered Town Planner and Landscape Architect, former Head of Planning for the National Trust of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and I advise the National Trust for Jersey on a voluntary basis. I should just add at this point, sir, that I will be representing the Trust along with Mr. Aluto, the Chief Executive, across a whole range of issues, but in my own case, I won't be representing the Trust in relation to the Jersey Coastal National Park proposals. as I'm a co-author of the government report. So going back to your question, sir, the Trust, in our response, we state that we do welcome the Bridging Ireland Plan and its vision and purpose. So we do think it's very important that the Bridging Plan is put in place, in particular because there are matters relating to the conservation of the historic and natural environment which really do need stronger policies put in place as soon as possible. So we fully support the principle behind a Bridging Ireland Plan now. Our concern in relation to housing figures and therefore population is that in the absence of an up-to-date population policy and in view of the current uncertainty about in relation to coronavirus, etc., in terms of what has been happening to the population here in Jersey in very recent years, our concern is that the Bridging Ireland Plan is actually proposing too many houses at this stage. And the Trust is certainly not against any housing proposals or allocations being made, not at all. We accept that it's an important issue, housing is an extremely important issue, and the plan does need to make reasonable provision for that. But in the Trust's view, the provision proposed in the Bridging Ireland Plan is excessive and should be reduced until such time as more information is known about the population, i.e. the review plan.
Is that housing overall, or are you saying any particular type of housing is over-provided for in terms of affordable or private market housing?
We haven't made detailed comments in relation to the housing breakdown, sir. So an overall figure.
Okay, so just to get the position clear in my mind, you're happy for the plan to contain some housing numbers, and you're happy for the plan to contain some site allocations for housing, but you think it's excessive?
Yes, sir, but we haven't come up with a specific figure that we would like to see.
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah, because
okay.
The Trust does not have the information that we feel we would need and be comfortable with to come up with that.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Mrs. Day or somebody else from the States, do you want to come back on it?
Thank you, sir. My name's Kevin Pilley. I head up the Place and Spatial Planning team for the Government of Jersey, and I'm a Chartered Town Planner.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Is that any better? No. I'll try and speak a little louder then. Hello, my name's Kevin Pilley. I'm the head of Place and Spatial Planning in the Government of Jersey. I'm a Chartered Town Planner. And have worked both in the UK and in Jersey. In terms of the issues raised, I think there are a number of factors to take into account as to why it's appropriate to review the plan now, and specifically to deal with the issue of housing demand. We have latent demand for housing in the island that has been generated over the current plan period. The current plan period had a planning provision in it which was below the actual level of in-migration into the island, and as a consequence of that, we're of the view that there are some unmet demand for housing within the island. So that's one of the factors to consider in terms of bringing a plan forward at this stage. In addition to which, clearly the current plan made provision for housing. A lot of the provision within the current plan, if you like, has been taken up, and there's a need to bring forward a fresh supply, a fresh policy regime to address the issues of housing. And I think it's evident to many islanders that difficulties of accessing housing in the island is a real challenge for islanders, both in terms of affordable homes and also housing in the open market. And in Jersey, as in other places, notably the UK, we've seen considerable impact on house price increase, for example, relative to levels of income, and Jersey's not immune from that factor also. So I think there's a requirement for the plan to address what is a serious issue for islanders and seek to make provision for housing over this short-term plan period. We do acknowledge, however, that these are unusual circumstances relative to the impact of the pandemic and the impact of Brexit, which is why we've come forward with a short-term bridging island plan. And we will look to effectively reset the dial for a longer-term planning period once we have more information about the impact of those factors on the island's economy and more specifically on the impact of its population. And we'll also have further information which will be provided by the 2021 census.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be dealing with the numbers this afternoon, so we'll pick that up, the numbers this afternoon. Mr. Jackson, Constable Jackson, can I come to you, please? Your representation, you ask for the strategic proposal number 1 to include specific reference to the St Brellard's Bay Improvement Plan. Can you just explain that, please?
I do. St Brellard's Bay is a strategic tourism offering from Jersey, and the issue of regular approvals to develop what were commercial premises, commercial hotel premises into private residences is compromising Jersey's offering. And I feel that it is a strategic issue, as it may well be in other areas of the island, to retain our tourism office offering, without which we will suffer the detrimental effects of not receiving tourists in future years.
Okay. Yeah, I understand the importance, as far as you're concerned, of the Bay. Your representation has asked for it to go into these strategic proposals, but these strategic proposals are about work that's to be done for the next island plan. Are you content for this improvement plan to come forward in the next island plan rather than this one, or do you want it done now?
Well, the reality is this has been going on certainly since a 1989 St Brellard's Bay Improvement Report, and it's, can I say, vacillated from one pillar to another. I believe time is of the essence. If we leave it any further, the strategic shoreline strip can easily get compromised, which we've seen, and I think we need to preserve that fiercely. And by prolonging the issue, I suspect that could well be compromised.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I, on a slightly different note, and just briefly, with regard to previous conversations, refer with my different hat of chair of the Housing Environment Scrutiny Panel, and this is really in reference to the population comments made, refer you to this report SR14 of 2021, which only came out last week.
Yeah, we have seen it.
It's come to you. I just wanted to make sure it's had.
No, we have seen it.
Good.
Yeah. I'm going to come to the Chamber of Commerce, please.
Hello, Robert Goddell.
Your name, sorry, sir?
Robert Goddell, representing the Building and Development Subcommittee.
Okay, thank you very much. The Chamber of Commerce is extremely critical of the plan. You talk about it being politically motivated, you talk about it being driven by dogma, you talk about it being an objectors' charter. So clearly the Chamber is very unhappy. But you want the 2014 plan updated rather than a new plan prepared. But my question to you is, why won't the same criticisms apply if the state simply updates their existing plan? Why would that be any different to what they've done?
The current plan brings up a whole new raft of issues, which are separate to an update of the current island plan. I think that the island plan as it stands at the moment has a number of identified issues which are not operating as well as they may do. And it would have seemed sensible to us that rather than create what is effectively a whole new ball game in terms of the island plan, that the specific issues which were causing problems at the moment under the current island plan be addressed and in consultation with applications officers, because we're aware that applications officers have problems with the current island plan and would like certain wordings, certain policies amended slightly to improve the working of the island plan. I think the problem is here is that there is, because it is a sea change in the drafting of the island plan, that there's potentially a whole new area of issues, minor issues, large issues, which will be created as a result.
Okay, well, let's forget about the minor issues. Let's concentrate on the main big issues. You say there are big issues that are being introduced which weren't there before. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
Well, in our representation, we referred to various of the main issues which we felt would be the problem. I think the biggest issue really is in terms of delivery of new accommodation, new homes in the island, because there are significant areas where homes are unable to be delivered because of the mechanisms of the current island plan. We are obviously aware that the third-party appeal system over here is probably here to stay, but nevertheless it does create issues in terms of the delivery of increased densities, certainly in the built-up area, because there is there's a constant fight against development, which is understandable. We understand that development is not always particularly welcome. However, there are certain strategic issues of the island plan which need to be met, and a large proportion of the delivery of new homes is concentrated within the built-up area. We also have particular issues with regard to the raft of new requirements which will be brought in by this island plan, not least the carbon assessments for any sites which involve demolition and rebuilding of existing buildings. We certainly don't believe that there is sufficient objective and reliable scientific evidence or data to be able, anybody putting in an application to actually be able to fully ascertain that, and we certainly don't believe that there's anybody within the planning system who can accurately assess whether that information that would be required as a result of that process is correct or not. The problem is... Oh, sorry. We have an issue at the moment with E1 and ERE1, where we are required to provide marketing and costing analyses for certain changes of use. Again, in that situation, it's not my understanding that anybody in the planning department has the expertise to be able to accurately assess that.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there. I mean, there is a particular session about these sorts of issues which you have been invited to, so we can pick up those details. It's really, the question I really have is what are the new issues that you think that are coming up? Because affordable housing and the provision of housing has been a major issue as far as I read the background material for Jersey, and that remains the case. Is there any other very significant issues that are coming up, apart from the detailed matters that you've been talking about now?
Well, another one of the significant issues is the large amount of legislation, or SPGs, which are undetermined at the moment, which makes it impossible to really make a start on any planning application. We're also very concerned that provision hasn't been made within the island plan to address the shortage of commercial and industrial space within the island, and I don't think anything's been done really on that front.
Well, we're going to be looking at that in the economy session. There's a particular point in that afternoon's discussion about suggested sites. So
I think to pull it back to the point was that we didn't feel that it was the right approach to go for a completely new island plan as it is at the moment, because there are certain aspects of the current island plan which, had they been properly addressed, could have resolved a lot of these issues.
Okay. Thank you. I think we understand. Do you want to come back on that?
I can pick up a number of points, if I may, sir. Firstly, to deal with the issue raised by the Consultation in terms of St Brilard's Bay. A couple of points. Firstly, the 1989 improvement plan that the Constable referred to is very much a traffic management and physical enhancement plan, just for the inspector's background. In terms of the relevance of St Brilard's Bay to the island's tourism industry, I think that's acknowledged in the plan. St Brilard's Bay is identified as a tourism development area in the plan, and there will be subsequent discussion around the economy policies in the plan, where we talk around the issue of how best the plan might respond to the challenges that the island has relative to the existing stock of hotel bed spaces.
that's in the economy session as well.
That's right. So I think the challenge to the island's tourism industry is recognised, but as you rightly say, these are strategic proposals at the outset of the plan, and we would contend that the issues that particularly face the Bay in terms of challenges to its tourism function and to its environmental quality are addressed in more detailed policies later in the plan. Turning now to the issue of the Chamber of Commerce's criticism of the decision to undertake a new plan. As you've already mentioned, we have a legal requirement to do that, or the Minister does. And I would further add that the plan is really a response to the challenges of the moment. And we will all be aware of the particular challenge given the events last week in Glasgow around the challenge of climate change. And it's appropriate that the plan makes responses to these what are significant challenges for the island and further afield. And the plan has a range of policy provision to address these new areas. And we feel it's appropriate that the revision of the plan picks up these issues. And that's one of the justifications for creating a new plan, is to address the challenges of the moment. Linked to that, we've already touched on the issue of housing challenges. And of course, related to climate change is the issue of flood risk that we face in the island. And the current plan doesn't particularly address the issue of flood risk, both from coastal flood risk and also surface water flood risk. So there are some key areas that need to be addressed in revising the plan. And we're of the view that when we revise these issues, they ought to be done in a comprehensive manner that's consistent, and there are obviously interrelationships between a lot of these issues, and it's very hard to deal with these issues in isolation, particularly given their strategic significance. In terms of the point raised by the Chamber relative to some of their current frustrations around seeking to secure planning consents for development schemes that may be more dense than some neighbours or some neighbourhoods wish to see. What we would suggest is that given the draft plan's development strategy that seeks to focus more development within the existing built-up area to make more efficient use of land, we would suggest that the draft plan would add further weight to the more efficient forms of development that hopefully will be delivered in the island, and in a sense then should strengthen the the Chamber's concern that adequate support is not being given to more efficient forms of development in the island. In terms of the point raised about supplementary planning guidance, we have set out in the plan a list of supplementary planning guidance that would need to be brought forward to accompany any new plan, whether that deals with new issues, as I've already mentioned, around things like flood risk or sustainability statements, or to revise existing guidance. And we have a programme and a prioritisation that we would give to that to ensure that we could bring forward supplementary planning guidance in a timely manner.
Thank you very much. It's inappropriate really to ask you at this point then, because the National Trust have requested that you put specific reference to carbon neutrality by 2030 into the plan. And I see you now have your strategic proposals for carbon neutral for your roadmap. Do you think you need to add something into the plan at this stage to refer to that?
Thank you very much. At this stage, I don't think that is appropriate. The preferred strategy that was published a few weeks ago sets a clear intended strategic direction, but that has only been published in advance of the carbon neutral roadmap in order to give more time for it to be digested until it is published in the carbon neutral roadmap and until the roadmap is adopted by the Assembly. That is not policy of the States Assembly. So at this stage, and until that is concluded, we expect in April next year, clarity on that is still to be determined. The final thing I would say, though, is you will have noticed from the preferred strategy that there is a strategic policy 1, which in accordance with our extension of the Paris Agreement to Jersey proposes a minimum emissions trajectory that we would seek to follow to achieve net zero by 2030. It also proposes a policy around carbon neutral by 2030, which leaves the subsequent decisions on whether that is an appropriate goal for the island to a future government. So even once we get to April, we will effectively adopt a plan which requires us to do the work necessary to enable us to decide to become carbon neutral by 2030 at a later point, but doesn't actually commit us to that deadline.
Okay. What's the status of the document that was published on Wednesday, please? I think is that what you were just referring to there?
That's correct, yeah. So the preferred strategy is published by ministers to help the island understand their intended direction of travel. So in a similar way we did with the island plan when we published the preferred strategy in October 2020, it set an intended direction and provided a framework for us to test thematic and detailed policies against. The actual strategic policy is then incorporated in the island plan and will apply subsequent to its adoption. It's the same approach in the carbon neutral roadmap. So it's a statement of intent that will be replicated in the carbon neutral roadmap for debate and adoption next year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Strategic Proposal 4, that's the West of Ireland framework. I was hoping that we might be able to ask Deputy Tadia what his views were, because he's expressed some views about this. One of the changes he wants, the Minister is minded to agree, that's a reference to the Sustainable Communities Fund applying to the whole of the island. The Minister is minded to agree to that amendment proposed by the Deputy. But maybe the states can help us on this. The Deputy talked about wanting a master plan rather than a framework. Now, we assume from that he's talking about a more detailed document than the framework. That's what we assume. Is that right?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, I think it may just be a question of semantics. I mean, I think the strategic proposal that we set out in the plan is around looking to do some more work to explore the potential contribution that Lekeneve and the areas associated with that part of the island may offer to meet some of the island's development requirements, and we propose to undertake this work during the plan period of the Bridging Island Plan, in order that we might then bring forward new policies and proposals in the subsequent Island Plan review. I think part of that master planning or development framework exercise would involve community engagement with the parish, the local deputies, and also key stakeholders in the area, such as landowners and also owners of key sites like Jersey Airport, for example. So, we would envisage undertaking a more detailed piece of work to look at the development potential and capacity of that area to contribute to the island's development needs in the next plan period. So I think that's the framing of the proposition. What form that takes remains to be seen. Whether we do end up identifying specific sites or whether we have generic policies, I think will depend on the substance of the work and the opportunities that are identified as a consequence of that. And of course, those opportunities may be related to economic development, they may be related to housing development, but they may also be related to things like community infrastructure as well. So we'd look to ensure that that was a broad piece of work that sought to support the potential role of Lekeneve as a secondary centre for the island.
Yes, I mean, that was just going to be my question of clarification, really. You're not, from some of the objectors seem to be saying that you seem to be planning a different role for St Keneve in relation to St Helier, or, that rather than, it's almost possibly becoming a competing equal centre, St Helier. That my understanding of the plan is that's not, you're trying to reflect what is currently the position, and that you're doing some more detailed work about it, but not actually changing its strategic place in the sort of planning hierarchy, if you like, of the island for generally.
That's right, sir. I think it's significant to say that St Helier is very clearly the island's primary centre. It has is predominantly the base for much of the island's employment activity. It has the largest residential population. It has a lot of the public sector services are based in St Helier, in the town of St Helier. Lekeneve de facto terms serves as a secondary centre by virtue of some of the retail offering it makes. It was developed significantly during the 1960s, and there is a large amount of suburban housing development in Lekeneve, and it therefore serves that purpose as a secondary centre in the island currently. As I say, largely as a consequence of that level of retail provision around Lekeneve precinct and red houses. It also has a number of elements of community infrastructure, such as a swimming pool and a sports facility, which is a major asset for the island, and one of the island's secondary schools. So it does serve that purpose. It's also well served with transport links because of its relationship to the airport. So the bus service from Lekeneve into town is very good, and also there's a continuous off-road cycle and footpath link into St Helier. So in terms of dialling back out and looking at a sustainable pattern of development in the island, there may be opportunity to look at the potential for Lekeneve to begin to perhaps offer more employment opportunities, not necessarily to compete with St Helier, but to offer potential choice of location of employment. And as I say, some of that might be associated with the potential development opportunities at the airport. We've already seen retail development there. One of the former telephone exchanges is already being used as a digital hub in the west of the island, so it's providing a remote digital location for employment activity. So our proposal is simply to explore that in greater detail and to look at the potential for that area to contribute to the island's broader development, but not to compete with St Helier per se.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Strategic proposal number 5 was about the infrastructure roadmap. We have no questions about that. I think it's a perfectly straightforward proposal that you've got. Just finally, before we conclude this section, can I ask somebody from the States about a dedicated tourism section in the plan? The Visit Jersey representation sought a specific section about tourism. We're assuming that you think that that is adequately covered in the employment and economic side of the plan.
Yes, sir. Clearly, Jersey's traditional industries of agriculture and tourism remain significant for the island. Obviously, finance is the predominant, financial services is the predominant economic activity in the island. But the plan does make provision for both agriculture and tourism policies in the economy section. And as we've already mentioned, we define things like tourism development areas, of which St Brelade's Bay, St Aubin, St Helier and Gorey are identified. And we explore in some of the Minister's response to some of the consultation challenges, not least from the likes of Visit Jersey, around how we might protect or regulate change in the island's hotel bed stock in particular.
Right, thank you very much. Mr. Salter, do you have any other questions about the proposals?
Sorry. No, thank you.
Good. Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Andrew, again, sorry.
Oh,
sir.
sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah. The Milk Marketing Board. Yes, right, sir. Appropriate at this stage because we will be dealing with that under the economics side of it and the spatial plan. So I think it's not the right time we need to talk about now, unless you think one of the strategic proposals in the plan is wrong or needs amending in any way.
Can you use a microphone?
Just use your microphone.
For the live stream, please.
Sorry, beg your pardon. Comment on number 3, for further work. The reason I say that, sir, because the assessment of sites for housing have taken a very detailed and clearly set out format. But this is a summary of the process that's gone through, and the right-hand column refers to the agricultural status. And the agricultural status seems to be trumped every time by other considerations. And I think that we would like to see further work given to the classification of agricultural land rather than this very simplistic form that's been made here.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the point you're making.
Thank you.
Right. In that case, we are going to move on to the strategic policies. Now, there's some change in people sitting around the table. Helen, do we need to? Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Do you want to make a point, sir, about the policies or the proposals?
Really, in relation to your opening points in terms of the Bridging Island Plan and the timing of it in particular, point 2 question, can acceptable short-term plan be prepared in the current circumstances?
Yeah.
Okay, my name's Graham Smith from Jersey Business. We're the enterprise agency that supports businesses across all sectors. Probably my kind of key comments in relation to the Bridging Island Plan is 2 concerns really in terms of timing and consultation. In terms of timing, and this is really difficult, I do appreciate in terms of, when do you time this? But in the absence of a full population policy, that does give me real concern, and that feeds into the second point in terms of consultation. In reality, the consultation here has taken place during COVID and Brexit, and to be fair, most business leaders will have been focused on other matters rather than the Bridging Island Plan. And to be fair, even myself and Jersey Business, our focus was supporting businesses, and as such, we probably didn't spend as much time on the Bridging Island Plan in consultation as we would have liked. So in terms of timing, that concerns me that there are some key issues in terms of how they are thought through. And an earlier comment in terms of perhaps it should have been better to focus on the key strategic issues, the major issues, as opposed to what is now starting to become a full island plan rather than interim island plan. From a Jersey business perspective, and we'll cover these under the economy point, but the 4 key areas of concern that I have is the housing that has been articulated before. That is not just key worker accommodation, but also workforce accommodation. From the analysis that we've done, an example, in hospitality, we've identified there's about 1,400 vacancies in terms of roles. If we're able to secure people to fill those roles, we simply can't house them. So there is a huge amount of demand and a lack of supply currently, which gives me cause for concern. And I don't believe the existing papers reflect the reality of where we are now as a result of COVID and Brexit. The second area is EV1, visitor accommodation, which there's an element of restriction in there. That will have a serious impact in terms of investment into the hospitality industry, and that will be covered separately.
We've got a separate session.
I won't comment on that. Zone business and industrial sites, there is a lack of supply pre-COVID, and as businesses move away from just in time to just in case, where we need to keep stock, that is a real cause of concern. And just as a generality, cost of planning and the impact that has on building costs in Jersey, which are significantly high. So those, for me, are the 4 key areas that if we're to have a Bridging Island plan, I would like to see challenged and debated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I mean, yeah, two of those definitely will be during the economy session next Monday.
Yeah,
and we can look at actually the other one, costs of planning, possibly yourself on housing, if that's what your concern is it?
It's not just on housing, it's across the whole piece. The cost to build in Jersey, even for business, is significantly higher. Well, so, yeah, it goes across, but that's probably the main area, housing.
We can take that in the economy session, and housing we'll be looking at this afternoon.
Yeah, and I'm sure the states have noted the points you've made, that the key areas that you think should have been more adequately addressed. I assume that you don't want us to recommend that the plan be abandoned at this point.
No, not at all.
Thank you very much.
It's a point that it's the reality. We've had a COVID crisis, so the response from business will have been naturally curtailed.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, Constable Jackson.
May I, with my parish hat, I believe that my colleague Deputy of Tadir is unable to be here, but I need to comment on the proposals to make Kenvay a second centre. I just need to make the panel aware that there will be an enormous local opposition to that.
There is a strategic policy, I think, on dealing with this matter, so we'll discuss it in the next part of this morning session. Right. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to strategic policy.
Need 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
You need 5 minutes. Right. We will adjourn for 5 minutes and start again at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.
If you're not participating,
changing over very quickly. We're moving on to strategic policies now. Not surprisingly, there have been a very large number of representations covering a whole wide range of issues. Clearly, the spatial strategy, that's SP2, features strongly in the representations. We're fully aware of the starkly different views that have been expressed about the spatial strategy issue. The views range from somebody saying you should have no development whatsoever to people saying you should only develop urban sites and nothing in the countryside at all, to some people, or relatively few people, but some representation saying, well, Jersey has no real countryside, so you don't need to bother very much about the countryside. So the views are very stark and range over a wide area. But we are well aware of the strength of the views. Jersey Electricity is not here, and were going to be here, I think, but I think there's been a COVID problem there. I think their particular point, I think, was that they wanted SP1 to refer specifically to replacing fossil fuels with electricity. That was the point they were making. Perhaps somebody from the States can respond to that request from them.
Thank you very much. I would probably respond in context of the Strategic Policy 2 that's just been published in the document we talked about before, the Preferred Strategy, which sets out an energy policy position, which does definitely recognise the potential opportunity for Jersey in electrification, but it also points to a series of other considerations in respect of other fuels. And so in the context of that kind of change in the island plan, I would suspect is not within keeping with our wider energy policy position. Okay.
Sorry, my microphone isn't on. The National Trust and Society Jersey, you both broadly support the strategic policies, and we've noted that the National Trust has made a lot of detailed suggestions, reference to biodiversity in SP1, for example. You want to add significantly to a number of the policies, remove phrases like where possible. We've noted all those, and there's really no need for you to go into any detail about those. We don't want to discuss those points here. We've read them and we'll consider them. But what we do want some clarification from is your reference to small coastal settlements, and you want them added to the hierarchy and specific policies designed for them. Is there a particular problem here that needs to be addressed? And if so, how do you want it addressed?
Thank you, sir. The concern is that the settlement hierarchy is not completely comprehensive. Most recognised settlements are included in it, but there are a number of small settlements, some of them coastal, not all, that aren't included in the hierarchy but are included perhaps in the green zone. And if all goes well and the policies are applied properly, then such settlements of historic interest, I'm thinking of perhaps a Roselle, Greve de Lec, would be fully protected. But we are concerned, sir, that when it comes to making decisions on planning proposals, there could be cases within those settlements where a proposed development might be considered suitable, which could lead to permission being granted, which would then sort of fly in the face of those policies and potentially weaken the whole strategy. So we are suggesting, really, rather than actually formally requesting, we're suggesting that, in fact, there should be, certainly ideally in this bridging plan, but certainly in the next iteration, the full review, that the analysis of all the settlements across the island should be more comprehensive. and not necessarily including unlisted, if you like, settlements in one of the existing categories, but possibly introducing a new category. It could be something like special protection settlement, something like that, because it's a bit misleading or confusing to include settlements with no status in the hierarchy in the open countryside. We're seeking really further clarification on what the status of those unlisted settlements should be. Are they areas where there'll be no development, or do they deserve, say, an inset map type approach?
I'm not quite following your argument, because you did say that actually if the policies are implemented appropriately as they're drafted, there won't be a problem. So I don't quite understand. I mean, there's nothing much that we can do about insisting that the states implement their policies properly.
I think there's concern, sir, that there have been approvals granted in areas where the policy would imply that there shouldn't be. So if there's a problem with the existing plan in that respect, this is an opportunity to rectify that.
But as I understand you, there isn't a problem with a policy. There's a problem with the way the states makes decisions.
That may be the case, but is there then a way of ensuring that there's a better framework for a clearer framework for making those decisions in? We're suggesting that there could be.
So you would want us to recommend stronger policies for these, what you call small coastal settlements?
Yes, sir.
But you haven't got any wording to suggest that you suggest we put in?
Well, the designation of conservation areas and the extension of the national park would help, but we consider that it would be clearer if the settlement hierarchy were more comprehensive.
All right, thank you very much. Response?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, I think there are two issues here. One is a sort of academic question as to how the other parts of the island that might be enjoy some level of development are recognised in the settlement hierarchy. And that might be an academic question. And then the second element to that is what then happens to them if they're not addressed in the current settlement hierarchy. We would suggest that places like Roselle and Grève de Lec, some of those small historic harbours, are located as defined in the draft plan within the coast and countryside. So they would be subject to the planning policy regimes for the coast and countryside, which are more restrictive and tighter relative to development opportunities than they would be if they were in one of the defined settlement centres. So in that sense, the policy provision provided by the plan should support the Trust's aspiration in terms of providing those smaller settlements with a more rigorous protective policy regime. The Places chapter is a new element to the island plan. It's something that doesn't feature in the current plan. It's something that we would have liked to have developed further, had opportunities allowed us in terms of producing a 10-year plan rather than a bridging plan. And it may be something that we can explore in the subsequent island plan review when we address the Places chapter more comprehensively. But I think the as I say, in terms of concern about the level of protection afforded to those areas, that's addressed both by specific policy that applies either to the green zone or the coastal national park, and likewise PL5, the policy that relates to the coast and countryside, sets a relatively low expectation for new development unless it's related to a coastal countryside location. So in that sense, the aspirations of the Trust should be met. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, you'd better implement your policies properly, otherwise Mrs. Taylor is going to be contacting you and having a go at you.
As a matter for my colleagues in the development control team, sir.
Oh, that's a convenient way of dealing with it. Yeah. Right. St Brellard's Bay. St Brellard's Bay Association. Yes, is it Mrs. Scott?
Yes, sir.
Good, right, Mrs. Scott. You want the improvement plan included in SP1, but it seems to us that SP1 is really a high-level plan, a high-level policy about climate change.
I totally agree, sir, and we will withdraw that.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
We do have thoughts on this question about whether the broad spatial strategy of focusing development on existing built-up areas is appropriate for two reasons. One is the way in which the whole of St Brellard's Bay has been characterised as a local centre. There's a question of definition, at least, because if you look at something like the integrated landscape and seascape assessment, that actually includes 3 coastal units, including Much Coastal National Park. Also, when you look at the Minister's representation SR51, it suggests that work is being done on the St Brelard character appraisal, and it doesn't actually directly respond to them. When you look at the recommendations in that appraisal, it is recommending that quite a lot of that area of St Brellard's Bay, the central area, that residential development be restricted. In addition, insofar as characterising the bay as a local centre is concerned, it perhaps is worth pointing out it has no supermarket, it has no school. The only development it really has that you would say is not residential development relates to the tourist development.
Okay, I'm going to stop you, Scott, because we're going to pick this up under places.
Yes,
because
sir.
that's really where I think your concerns are best addressed. Deputy Gardner. The Minister's supporting your amendments to SP3 and 7. Those are references to people with disabilities. Are you content with what the Minister is proposing?
Yes, and it was important for me to make sure that the people with disabilities, it will be included on strategic level,
Yeah.
because any decision-making process can address children, elderly, other vulnerable groups, but somehow disabilities were excluded, and this is the reason that I brought 4 different amendments.
No, thank
So
you very much.
you.
And I see the Minister is taking that further, I think, in the policies in relation to transport as well and things. So I think, as far as I can see, the Minister has certainly responded
And
very
I'm content
positively.
with his response. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Senator Moore.
Yes.
Hello. You want changes to SP2 to allow more flexibility regarding existing buildings in the countryside. I see that the Minister doesn't want to go as far as you do, but he is prepared to make some changes to policy HH. Does that satisfy you?
Sir, I think that there could be a further meeting in the middle. I think that Jersey has a beautiful countryside and coast, which is much appreciated by many. And I think the National Trust themselves would be supportive of making better use of our buildings. There was a slight mention by Mrs. Taylor earlier of some out-of-character developments occurring around the island, and particularly in countryside areas. So we do have to be extremely careful, as your conversation with Mrs. Taylor identified, that we meet the policies as best we can. But there are many opportunities to develop existing buildings or to subdivide large premises that are already existing, which is also more sustainable in terms of the use of building materials as well. And so I would like to see greater consideration of my amendments in that line. I should also identify to you that my thinking on this point did come about following a personal experience of applying for outline planning. It is not particularly not either here nor there for me personally and financially, but it led me down a line of thinking. So if, for example, I were to seek planning application for my outbuildings to become a pool house, a party room, a gym, a home office, I'd probably have it accepted. But to create additional units of accommodation, and accommodation in a situation where accommodation is so desperately needed by islanders, I find the current situation and also the approach in this Bridging Island plan to not put the needs of the community first. I believe that we can find a balance, and so I hope that the Assembly will support the amendments that I have brought. The officers have also pointed me to the preference for focusing on larger settlements in terms of meeting or offering a greater opportunity to meet our sustainable transport hopes and aspirations for the island. Whilst I understand that we should be working towards minimising journeys on our lovely country lanes, which provide a great network of, for active travel and transport around the island, there are also alternatives and opportunities for people if small and smaller settlements were allowed, that that those people could use more sustainable transport. And I think there is a growing movement towards that. And as the officer pointed out earlier, unfortunately, we're slightly putting the cart before the horse in terms of the approach to those policies, because they have not yet been adopted by the Assembly. So there are a great number, I would suggest to you, of very much smaller settlements than those which are included in the plan today. Jersey historically has many farmsteads around the island, and they're part of our bucolic image and can be dealt with in a sympathetic way that would be more sustainable and assist in approaching the greater needs of islanders.
Can I just get clarification from you? Can I just get some clarification from you? Where you want a more flexible policy for the creation of residential accommodation, are you talking about traditional buildings, or are you talking about any buildings?
So the amendment particularly talks about traditional buildings and their ability to be adapted, but also there are larger buildings, larger houses, for example, that could be subdivided quite easily to provide additional units of accommodation.
I think that's what the Minister is thinking of doing with H8. The question of subdivision and creation of additional accommodation within existing homes or in extensions. But the creation of an entirely different, separate residential unit is something which you are happy to see in traditional buildings, but not necessarily in more modern buildings. Is that right? Have I got that right, or have I misinterpreted you?
Well, I think it's about maintaining a balance and maintaining the countryside the beauty of the countryside, and I think that there is a clear desire amongst islanders to preserve and maintain our beautiful environment. Therefore, the suggestion is, yes, that there are existing buildings that would be suitable for redevelopment, and that would make sense, because you would protect the environment whilst making use of them.
Okay, so that seems to be covered by policy RE3. Is that the one you were worried about? Which is, sorry, I think that's the right number? Or proposal, sorry, it's proposal under ERE2, and 3, that's right, which is, the states say they're going to produce supplementary planning guidance. Concerning that, I'd like the comments of the states about Mrs Moore's point, please.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, the question of the allowing development in the countryside is obviously a sensitive one in Jersey, and it's probably worth starting from the context that successive island plans have sought to protect the island's coast and countryside, and whenever we engage with islanders about any issues relating to the environment, the quality of the island's coast and countryside is always something that is raised as something of great importance to islanders, and something that the planning systems should seek to protect. And so that the question of development in the countryside is a particularly difficult one to manage. And clearly in the context of demand for additional homes in the island and the thrust to make more efficient use of existing buildings, there is a question mark about how we do that. And clearly the spatial strategy of the plan seeks to focus most development within the existing built-up area to ensure that we deliver the most sustainable pattern of development in the island. But there is this question about what we do with buildings in the countryside. The current policy regime seeks to presume against the creation of new households in the countryside, and it's noticeable if you look at the performance of the current plan. It's been very successful in directing development activity to the built-up area. So in terms of planning permissions granted over the current island plan for new dwellings, about over 90% of planning consents for residential development has been within the built-up area. Just over about 6% has been outside in the green zone and the coastal national park. So the plan's been successful in achieving its strategic objectives of seeking to direct development to the built-up area and protecting the quality of the coast and the countryside. And I think the Minister's concern is that any relaxation of that strategic direction of policy poses the threat of sort of unfettered development in the countryside, with implications both physically in terms of its impact on the character of the countryside, in terms of the impact of on the buildings that exist within the landscape, and then also looking at the wider question of sustainable development in terms of its relationship to services and transport links, etc. So I think it's at those two levels: one, the overall sustainable pattern of development in the island, and two, in terms of its physical impact on the buildings in the countryside. As you've already identified, the draft plan already makes provision for the potential conversion of traditional agricultural buildings and listed buildings to residential use, where it's considered that a residential use may be sustain the viability of those buildings and enable them to continue to be occupied. And as the draft plan's currently drafted, we would allow the creation of separate dwelling units, or the creation of new households where that supports somebody who's got some a dependent relative or some health challenges or things like that. I think the Senator's proposal is to widen that. The Minister's minded to explore that to a certain extent, but is, as I say, concerned about the unfettered release of regulation of development in the countryside, simply because of those challenges around impact on countryside character and the overall pattern of development.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I don't think Mrs. Senator Moore is suggesting unfettered development in the countryside, so I don't think you need to make the point. We do understand that. Right, thank you. Yes. Sorry.
Hello, sir. Stephanie Steedman, K Planning. I've no wish to interrupt, but the comments that I want to make supplement and seem appropriate at this time. So if I'm able to comment, otherwise I will wait for your invitation.
Are you talking about the SP2, a particular policy? Do you want a change made to the policy?
It follows on from the discussion that has just been had about the strategic approach. Yes.
Okay. Well, okay, let's see what you have to say.
Thank you, and please stop me if you feel that I'm straying. Understood.
Don't worry, we certainly will do that.
Thank you. Well, we know we have a complex situation, and the comments that I'd like to make in no way intend to suggest that anything is unfettered. I'm a planning practitioner. My day job is helping people navigate the planning system. And I don't say this lightly, but my observation is that the countryside in Jersey is being gentrified. The success of the policies that Kevin has talked about, the strategic approach, which started in the 1960s with Mr. Barrett, when he was invited to come over and help the island deal with pressures for development which were happening even then, have paved the way for a very successful protection of the island's countryside. I wouldn't argue with that or want to change that approach by any stretch of the imagination. But we're dealing with a shortage of land and high land prices, increasing building costs across a range of housing needs. And it's where do we put development, sirs? Affordability is affecting all sorts of islanders, and this informs my approach. Also, the land use pattern that we have in Jersey, which is based on, and it's interesting to hear the National Trust's observations about hierarchy settlements. Hamlets are a traditional building settlement group in the island where families and farms supported not just one house, not just one dwelling, but a number of dwellings. And we're now living in the 21st century with different approaches to working and shopping. And I totally understand the Minister's concerns about sustainable development and where development goes. But having dealt with a planning application in St John very recently for some affordable homes, it became clear to me as a result of listening to the constable's observations that the parish communities and the ability for young rural parishioners to afford housing close to their community was becoming really, really difficult and was a challenge. And also the strategic approach of directing most development to St Helier misses the point that there are a lot of people living in the rural parishes who want to stay in their communities. So we focus our assessment of trips on work and shopping, but I don't think there's any analysis of trips associated with families. So my thoughts on this, and I appreciate that it's wide-ranging, but that is the nature of the plan and the approach to this, is that the Minister's policies are missing an opportunity to allow families and small building, or where there are small building groups, where there would be no landscape harm if there was some infill. My view would be to allow conversion more widely than just traditional buildings. It would be modern buildings as well. This would allow families to provide affordable housing very quickly, not to have to wait for sites to be rezoned and SPGs to be formulated to deliver affordable homes. There could be controls in place through planning obligation agreements that tie those new dwellings into somebody with a family tie. I would leave others to think about the detail of that more carefully. And I think there is an opportunity, as I say, for a more community-based approach, which isn't about not focusing on the settlement hierarchy, but it's not missing an opportunity to, as we know from the current island plan, it talks about a shortage of land and making the best use of land that we've got. And I think that we don't have that.
Thank you. You've sort of jumped ahead of yourself slightly. We've got no, that's okay, because I had a question for you in relation to H8, the housing policy H8, which is the basically the same, the spatial strategy issue. And in a lot of your representations where you're making a plea for small parcels of land to be used for residential development for a limited number of houses on each. I think that's what you're talking about now. And you say in your representations that that approach would avoid the rezoning of greenfield sites.
Potentially.
Are you saying to us that from a spatial strategy point of view, if you had a large number of these small sites allocated for housing or used for housing, there wouldn't be any need for rezoning of any land, greenfields, larger greenfield sites? Because that's what your representation says, and I don't know if do you really mean that?
No, I don't mean there wouldn't be any need at all, and I'm not a demographer, and I'm not involved as closely as the Minister's officers are with the analysis of the numbers. I'm not claiming to hold that expertise.
No,
at all.
I understand that.
It is an observation that that the Minister is proposing as the solution to the current problem of affordable housing a number of green fields to be rezoned.
Yes.
I don't think I've seen anywhere policies that go beyond supporting traditional farm buildings or traditional buildings in the countryside. My observation would be if some of these smaller sites were allowed, then cumulatively, would that then avoid the need for as many green fields to be
well,
rezoned?
that's a different point, because your representation is pretty clear. It says it would avoid the need for, which implies...
Well, it should be qualified, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Well, that helps me. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm interested to hear the state's response, but I mean, I think we actually are going to deal with this afternoon in terms of housing demand and supply, particularly with regard to affordable housing. What do you think?
I think we can pick it up.
You're here this afternoon, aren't you?
My business partner will be here this afternoon.
Okay, well, I think it's probably best dealt with.
I think so.
In more detail.
And we'll pick it up this afternoon. The basic, the points that's being made.
Would you like me to address the issue of the hierarchy, sir?
Yes.
I think the point was raised that perhaps our existing spatial strategy and the hierarchy of settlements means that we miss opportunities to allow more development in the coast, along the coast and in the countryside. And an emphasis was placed on St Helier's role in meeting the island's development needs. I think whilst that's true, it's important to recognise that the hierarchy includes not only just the major centres of St Helier, but it also recognises that we do have other centres of development in the island which are either traditional parish centres or indeed some of those hamlets that have been referred to, and they are defined in the settlement hierarchy. They benefit from the built-up area boundary policies, where there is a presumption in favour of development coming forward. So where it's considered appropriate, those opportunities for infill, for extension and for the creation of new dwellings within those existing centres, as recognised in the settlement hierarchy, is already provided for in the plan. I think the more fundamental question is, what role do we see for the countryside in the island? And many will hold up the comparison of Jersey with Guernsey, where Guernsey has had a more relaxed policy regime for the development of the countryside, and therefore has a more dispersed settlement pattern in Guernsey, whereas in Jersey there is a distinction between the urban environment and the more rural environment. And I think the Minister's concern is that whilst you might want to look at these cases individually, it's the cumulative impact of erosion of the character of the countryside, and indeed the cumulative impact of all of those trip generations, whether that's to the local school or to the shops, or coming into St Helier to work or to undertake a retail activity. So I think it's important to keep that strategic view and to keep the strategic objectives in mind. Thank you, sir.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, Ms.
Could I just raise a point in response to the head of place and spatial planning's comments? I just wanted to raise that the point that the process whereby the local centres and the actual spread of development is being selected as well, the process by which development is being directed away from St Helier isn't totally transparent, because the public consultation sought that it be focused in St Helier and its environs. I do appreciate the point that's being made about if you can preserve footprint of buildings in the countryside and divide them and convert their use, then that's great, because you're not actually contributing to spread of development. But there's still this question about the transparency of that particular process.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Can I come to Constable Crowcroft, who's the deputy or constable? I'm not sure.
Constable St Helier. Yeah, not
Constable in St Helier. Right. You don't want SP2 to make any reference to Lekinaway. You don't want a change of status, as I understand it, and your argument essentially seems to me to be, well, we've got on very nicely without it, and we don't need it. And secondly, you're worried about the adverse impact on St Helier, possibly. I think we do understand your arguments, but my question to you is that if Mrs. Day and her colleagues produce a good plan, wouldn't that be a good thing?
You mean a good plan for Canavay?
Yes.
I wasn't particularly comforted by what Mr. Pilley was saying about Canavay being protected from becoming a second metropolis, because he was talking, for example, about new employment opportunities, and the plan refers to such things as evening entertainment, and it becoming more of a place that people will repair to for their evening entertainment as an alternative to St Helier. So, I mean, I think it threatens St Helier, particularly in terms of its retail and hospitality sectors, which have been hit hard by online shopping anyway. Certainly, the retail side has, and I think that it also could damage Canavay. Canavay is part of the charm of Canavay is that it's not St Helier. It's not. It doesn't have the same kind of activity and development and tall buildings and so on that people associate with the capital. I think, as I said in my amendment, there's a Pandora's box which could be opened if Canavay is given more development potential. And we're already seeing, because it is on the hierarchy, we are seeing a good deal of development. But you can imagine what will happen if, for example, the quite charming but low-rise precinct that people shop in, and I use myself when I'm on that side of the island, if that were to be bought up and turned into a vast shopping mall, and if the airport was to become the site of supermarkets and so on, that drives a coach and horses through all notions of having a single main town, and has enormous impact on traffic. For one thing, there'll be a lot of flows of traffic westwards from the rest of the island, and the traffic around that part of the island is already pretty intense most of the time, particularly if you're going back east from Canavay, from the airport, for example. The rugby club is another place we've seen enormous development on the airport road. This is happening anyway. It doesn't need the Bridging Island plan to encourage the process, which is already taking place under existing planning, unless you want to become like other small islands which have more than one capital. And I think that's bad for everyone.
Can I just push you a little on this, because it seemed to me that the plan pretty closely defines the centre of Kennervay, restricts it pretty much, which I would assume would be the attempt by the planners to make sure that St Kennervay doesn't threaten St Helier. You're not satisfied with that? You don't think that's good enough?
No, because I think that is the status quo. The reason people are alarmed about what's in the Bridging Island plan in respect of Kennervay is it does seem to promise more activity, more commercial activity, more, as I said before, more people repairing there for evening entertainment and so on. That, as I say, is not good for anyone. It's certainly not good for town, but it's not good for the countryside either.
Do you want to come back on that?
Just to pick up a couple of points, if I may, sir. The situation needs to be looked at in the context of both the current plan, where Le Kennervay is already defined as a secondary centre, and perhaps picking on up on the Constable's points that de facto Le Kennervay already serves as a secondary centre. And I think the plan is seeking simply to set out a proposal to explore the potential that Le Kennervay may have, in addition to which other parts of the west of the island, and we've already heard from some of the business interests in the room about concerns around provision of business premises, for example. There may be opportunity, for example, at the airport for the development of additional employment land which would support the island's economy. And I don't think the plan is seeking to challenge the primacy of St Helier, given the significant volume and weight of use in St Helier. I don't ever see Le Kennervay or Red Houses ever challenging the primacy of town. Unlike other places in the UK, St Helier does not have that competition from other centres. There's a captive audience, literally, in the sense that there's only one place to go if you want to do things like comparison shopping. Le Kennervay at the moment generally provides convenience shopping with a limited range of other smaller outlets. And I think certainly from a planning perspective, the island plan, successive island plans have been quite successful in terms of matching the scale of retail provision to the size of retail centre. And we aren't proposing to take the brake off the level of floor space that might be allowed in those other centres. And the plan in detailed policy sets out limits to the amount of floor space that we would permit, whether that's for employment land use or retail use. So I think it's simply a proposal recognising that Jersey's a small place with limited development opportunities, that over the bridging plan period we undertake some more work in consultation with local stakeholders, including the parish, local residents and landowners, as to the potential that Le Kennervay may have. And of course any policies or proposals that emerge from that as specific policies or proposals would be tested through a subsequent island plan review process.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Mrs. Moores.
So if I could just add some comments to the Constable St Heliers about a certain discomfort about this proposal. The airport is in St Peter. St Peter also has a retail centre, it has sports facilities, and it's also very near to the airport, and there is land around it being developed. I'm not trying to say don't develop here, develop there, but I am saying that the process by which Kennervay has been focused on for the secondary local centre just isn't clear, and it makes certainly a lot of members of the community uncomfortable, particularly because Kennervay is very close to areas of coastal national park, areas which actually are quite expensive, which people want to develop. So there is a logic, if you're going to increase density, do it in a place where perhaps the land is a bit cheaper and it's nearer to town.
Thank you, Mr. Moores. Mrs. Day?
Thank you. I just thought it would be worth highlighting that by virtue of the spatial strategy that the Island Plan has had over successive decades and successive island plans has led to the densification of Le Canavet, significantly so, particularly over the last plan period, where a number of low-density bungalow development have become 2 or 3 individual houses. And we have to recognise that these additional people in the west of the island deserve access to the same level of employment opportunity, open space, recreation, the local pub, as any other islander may. Highlighting also that we have included provision for a plan for town, recognising the same thing has been happening in St Helier, and we must meet that increased population with increased community and employment opportunities.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Day. Right. I want to go to the Jersey Farmers Union. Ah.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you. You want a measure introduced to calculate land value to allow for affordable housing. Can you explain what specific form of words you want and what you actually want? How do you want this to work?
Well, sir, if we look through the whole of the reasons for the 3-year bridging plan, one of the main ones is everyone in Jersey will tell you that we are short of housing, and the particular thing we're short of is affordable housing. What we don't seem to have seen, certainly not in public, is what is affordable. Who, and you know, is this affordable for someone who's on 200,000 a year, or is this affordable for someone who's on 30,000 a year? And we're making the point that we've taken a pragmatic approach, I believe, as a farmers' union, and that we may have to lose some greenfield sites, but we don't want to lose them and find, as has happened in the past, that very small numbers of the houses built on them are affordable, and the rest are just on the open market being sold outside the reach of the very people that I think most politicians want to support. So we would like to see that before, I think there's sometimes a danger of rezoning land and then someone picks it up, and as I say, instead of affordable housing you get 5 affordable and 20 that are not. So we feel very strongly that if we're going to give up land, that there's a strategic policy to be in place to say the price of land should be X. There are plenty, as you can see if you read Appendix 1 and then Appendix 2 and then Appendix 3, there are hundreds of verges of sites available. There are still disused glasshouse and redundant glasshouse sites that are available. And we want to see very clearly that somebody brings forward a policy that land will have a value, that we can build affordable houses for what I call the ordinary working man, and when that is when that price level is agreed, then you can move forward. And if people don't want to sell their sites or develop their sites, I see later in the plan the Minister talks about compulsory purchase, but it's no point waiting 5 years. I think everyone agrees we need some housing pretty soon. So we'd like to see a policy developed where there's an affordable price of land to build affordable housing.
Thank you. That's helpful. So you're looking for a price cap to be put on land that's going to be rezoned for affordable housing, and if the landowner doesn't want to sell for that price, you think the state should use compulsory purchase powers to acquire the land and build affordable housing on it?
Either that, sir, or move to another site, because there are plenty, as I say, there's a list of long fields that people want to put for building, and as my colleague Mr. Legali said earlier on, actually the scoring on all these sites is very, very similar. There's not a great deal of difference between them.
No, I think we would agree with you on that. When you look at the scoring system, there are a lot of options, and that's one of the challenges that I think the planners have faced to decide which sites they should actually allocate for affordable housing. So it's been, but thank you. I appreciate the point, and I understand the point you're making.
Thank you.
No, other than, again, it's something we're going to be looking at this afternoon, I think. I mean, we've been to look at virtually all of these sites that the councils, the states have identified. Apologies. Can we, I think, rather than ask the states to respond to that right now, unless there's anything you particularly want to, I think we could look at that this afternoon.
Just to pick up on perhaps on the points raised about access to affordable homes and their status into the future. So, firstly, on the issue of capping land value, I'm not sure that's within the legal gift of the minister through the planning and building law. Secondly, the issue of access to any affordable houses provided through the plan is managed through the Housing Gateway, which is administered by the Minister for Housing and Community. So the Minister for Housing and Community would set the criteria by which people are able to access any affordable homes delivered through the plan. And thirdly, just to make the point that where affordable homes are provided, they would be subject to a legally binding planning obligation agreement, which would ensure that they remain as affordable homes in perpetuity. So whether they're affordable homes for rent or affordable homes for purchase, they would be subject to that legally binding condition.
So
yes, okay, thanks. But are you here this afternoon? I think you are.
I am. Could I just respond to that? I'm not suggesting a legal cap. I'm making the point that you make, just like you would do in any business transaction, you make someone an offer based on a reasonable value, and if they don't take it, you move on to the next person.
Yeah, I think, okay, I understand the point. I think that does raise some other issues about the suitability of the sites. Which we will be looking at again this afternoon with regard to other factors rather than just the price. I think let's go back to that, can we, please? This afternoon.
Could I please just make a final point, because I know Montfortadia couldn't make the previous session because he's on bereavement leave, but he would want me to perhaps just mention that the point about Kennefe perhaps needing a bit of TLC is probably well made. So he's still, the idea of a master plan, something that actually helps with its appearance, we probably could all support. It's really this question about increasing the density that we're questioning.
Right, thank you very much. That's helpful. I don't think there is any further matters that I want to raise. Right, we want to raise a matter here. Right, MS Planning want to raise a matter. Mr. Steen.
Thank you, sir. It's John Nicholson from MS Planning.
Oh, it's John Nicholson. Sorry, Mr. Nicholson.
It's quite all right. I was going to just follow up. The comments that we've had in this discussion have been about detailed aspects of the spatial strategy, the status of Kennefe, whether hamlets have a role to play, whether conversions have a role to play. And I was just going to bring back the comments to the broad spatial strategy. And the opening statements that you made, sir, about the plan and its policies being based on evidence, which was clear, robust, and we could test. And the plan and its policies having a realistic expectation of delivery, some certainty. In particular, I'd like everyone to bear in mind that we have various policy threads within this plan which should be joined up in their approach. And the spatial strategy is, in its broadest terms, a reflection of the established island plan. A slight evolution, and I think there is general qualified support for that approach. But we just don't know if this focus remains valid. And if not, what is the scope of change across the issues such as Kennefe, hamlets, and individual conversions? Because I don't think we have information on the capacity of the built-up area, how that capacity may actually manage the change in housing needs from approximately 400 units a year to a position which will be considerably debated later, but is already acknowledged to be at least twice that delivery. Into that mix, we have policies on hotels and tourist uses, heights, conservation areas, etc. And it seems to me there is a kind of hopeful approach that the spatial strategy remains valid and that we don't need an alternative which may involve greenfield sites. because we don't have a detailed and robust position as to the capacity of the built-up area, particular vis-à-vis the main settlements, the secondary settlements, etc. It seems to be rather hopeful, sir.
Yeah, you've picked up points that we're going to be discussing in a fair amount of detail this afternoon, hopefully, but thank you for your contribution. Do you, I mean, you're very familiar with the island. Clearly, you worked here for many years, I think. Do you basically support the essence of the strategy, i.e. that development should be focused on the existing built-up areas, possibly with some expansion of some of them, or are you of the view that the development should be spread much more widely around the island?
I'm optimistic that the first of your strategies works, sir.
Thank you. That's helpful. I have no more questions. Mr. Dalton, do you have any more questions about the strategic policies? Yes, sir.
Stuart Fell for the Société Jerseyese. We have supported the suite of strategic policies generally, but I have a number of reservations about the likely implementation of the policies, which I know you'll come on to later, but I think they are fundamental. There's much stress in the strategic policies about identity and placemaking and recognising the quality of particular environments. And I think there is some cause for concern that the affordable housing sites have been selected without full attention to those issues. They've been selected partly for their location and partly in relation to infrastructure and the likely effect on landscape. But beyond that, there's been no assessment of the needs of individual communities around the island, particularly local centres. And I think that is a potential difficulty and an anomaly in the way that the plans are structured.
Yeah.
That is something I was going to ask the States this afternoon.
Thank you.
Actually.
I think it is one of the fundamental concerns of the Société. It's beyond our normal scope, which is the protection of the island's heritage. But I think that that anomaly could lead to problems in the future. Beyond that, I think the main concern of the Société is the change in St Helier, which is the island's capital. And there's evidence from recent development proposals in the absence of conservation areas and the identity of places, that there's a sense of confrontation built up between the heritage lobby, which is looking for balance, and the development lobby, which is responding to the government's desire for more development. I think in the absence of conservation areas, that will not change, and the emphasis in one of the later strategic policies for maximum density, highest possible density, is a continuation of the present situation. And I think that it's certainly the Société's view that the heritage lobby is seen as an opponent of development, of much needed development, and the balanced dialogue that we hope for is not yet established. I think in that sense there's a particular problem in that there is no supplementary planning guidance envisaged quickly to support a whole range of these quite significant policies. I know you're coming on to conservation areas at a later time, but been waiting a long time for that, and there's no guidance in place as to how that will be interpreted. And there's naturally a fear in the development industry that it will be negative and will cause more disruption. That is not helpful. The same applies to identifying the particular qualities of individual areas. There's no guidance on that either, which is a cause for concern. If I may, I'll just, there are one or two other points, I just need to find them. Placemaking, I think, is one of the most important new policies in this plan, long overdue, but no one knows what it means yet. And I think policy SP4, there's a slight concern there that new words are being introduced which will be critical in decision-making on development proposals. The words are protect and improve. And also the word conserve is used in the in the introductory text to the policy. Without some kind of glossary of terms which explain the meaning of these words, I think there'll just be a rather muddled debate potentially when applications for development come before the planning committee.
Yeah.
I think it's most important that they're defined as part of this plan rather than left until later. To make one final point on the detail, the existing policy Sp4 is fairly broad brush and does not specifically say that it is only concerned with protecting listed buildings or conservation areas. There's a rather more nebulous aspect to Sp4 because it talks in terms of protecting the island's heritage. And a recent appeal decision on Villa Levesque Cottage at Trinity, which involved a non-listed building where an appeal had been made, the inspector upheld the view that policy Sp4 does protect any heritage interest in the island. The conclusion and recommendation of that inspector was endorsed by the Minister, but now we have an Sp4 policy which takes out that aspect of strategic protection for the environment. I think that's all I have to say, so
Good.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Can I just get clarification from you? Are you opposed to the broad strategic approach that has been taken, that development should be concentrated in the built-up areas and particularly in St Helier?
I don't oppose that, but having been involved in planning for decades, I do think that the success of such policies lies in the policies lower down. I'd make just one final point about Le Quennevay. Having seen recent development and forthcoming development in St Helier, which I think will permanently damage part of the town's character, I do support the expansion, the careful expansion of Le Quennevay, because it would provide some release to the impending pressures on St Helier itself, which is a town of some significance.
Okay, thank you very much. Now you've raised a potential dispute. Yes, Senator Moore.
Not necessarily a dispute, sir, but I would just like to pick up on that point made by Mr. Fell. Also, I think it's important when considering the pressure and the style of development that would be necessitated by focusing development on St Helier, we must focus on the quality of life that provides those people who would dwell in those units of accommodation. We've seen recently planning passed on a very large development on a very narrow street with buildings both to the west and to the east. And that prospect of living is most different to what could be provided to members of the public on housing developments where they could have gardens and greater space for them, their families. I'm not sure you've had an opportunity to read the scrutiny panel's review report that was published last week, but there are testimonials there that very clearly express the problems that key workers in particular find with regard to the quality of life. And so therefore I hope that we can give that consideration.
Right.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you very much. We're going to have a short break now and swap around with people, and we talk about places for the rest of the morning. 5 minutes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thanks very much. Simon Matthews on behalf of the Jersey Construction Council. Just to pick up on two parts of places, on SP strategic policies. First one, SP3 placemaking.
Yeah.
Construction Council warmly welcome the clarification on placemaking inside this Bridging Island plan. What we're hopeful for there inside the criteria, and we have made the point which hasn't been recognised by the Minister, is looking for greater incentivisation of innovation, modern methods of construction and other aspects as a significant benefit to come through in planning. Problem with placemaking and context is when you put a building between two other buildings, you generally tend to be guided by those other buildings when allowing the permission for that building to proceed. Well, the whole idea of placemaking is that it creates its own impression, it creates a standard, it creates a new placemaking. And we'd like to see more use in context of other aspects of modern methods and innovation in a method of supporting these and encouraging developers and other building owners to focus on new technology, new methods have been able to assist in meeting other criteria. I'm going to hand across to a colleague who's going to cover off on SP7. Thank you.
Good morning. Sorry, I'll just pull the microphone over. Matthew Spry from Lichfields, also representing the Jersey Construction Council. I don't know whether this morning's the right time to bring up the question of viability or whether it's one to address in the housing supply policies this afternoon. I'm happy to wait if you'll want to.
This afternoon, Matthew, please.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we're going to have a 5-minute break. We will resume, well, we'll have slightly more. We'll resume at 12:15. The places section, 5 really very straightforward policies. They detail the nature and extent of development for different parts of the island and identify the key policies. Again, I think here we have a wide range of issues raised in the representations. Many of them are matters of detail that we'll be picking up in the later sessions and not really relevant to these high-level discussions about the places. I'm going to start with Deputy Gardner.
Thank you.
Your schools amendment, has that now been resolved? There was a state's proposition, I understand it, recently. Has that resolved your issue about the schools?
No, sir. It hasn't been reserved and it hasn't been progressed. And this is why it's so important that we address strategically education estate. We all speak about St. Helier as a sustainable community. I cannot see sustainable community without decent, modern education estate. As you probably, I'm not sure if you paid attention, but it's very little about education and state in the Bridging Island plan. I will concentrate on 6 primary schools that we have in St. Helier. Only 1 of them meet a requirement of the modern school. We didn't have a review, we didn't have updated catchment areas for 15 years in St. Helier. And I have asked the question, you can find written question that I asked recently, and I've been told work is in progress. The Rouge Bouillon School and all educational estate review, you can find the response from Education Minister in March 19 that it's in progress. We ask again in March 21, it's in progress. I asked 2 weeks ago, Minister, what's happening, and I've been told, I've seen a draft and it's going through various, we have a corporate asset management board, we have a regeneration steering group, which I understand it needs to go, but this review was promised to us to be published in June, after July, after September, and in November we haven't seen anything certain. Another thing, I'm not sure if you're aware about the state management report that Public Accounts Committee recently published, and Rouge Bouillon School was there as a case study, but the main point that I would like to make, which related to this particular amendment and to this particular point, it's there is no clarity of prioritization. I also asked question how many of primary schools in Jersey, in St. Helier, because I'm St. Helier deputy, they comply with known BB 103 policy in the UK for the outside-inside spaces at schools, and the response which came that it's not statutory in Jersey, and none of the existing schools will be looked at according to this policy, only for the new build. So this is bringing me to this situation. I just before yesterday decided to look very quickly at the development that will become available this year, next year, within the next year and a half, 2 years. We have Summerland and Rouge Bouillon 82 units, Horizon 218 units, La Colette Low Rise 147 units, Ancourt 168 units, Mayfair Site 201 place, Rivera Hotel 106, The Lime 147. So I'm speaking about development in central and south of St. Helier, which come in around 1,059 units, and it's already approved and in work in progress. On advanced plans, we have Brewery Site 271, we have Savoy Hotels that just submitted another 56 units, we have South Hill submitted planning application, we have Waterfront, so we're talking about another 1,000 units for within the next 2-3 years during this Bridging Island plan. Where children will go to school? For me, it's about looking into the areas where we can develop schools before we're signing off plans.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just stop you? I think we have got a section. We've got a session on infrastructure, okay. And I think you're coming to that session.
Yes.
Good. So I think that some of the detailed points you're making about the provision of schools, which is an important part of the infrastructure, is something we can pick up then. So I don't think it's particularly relevant for our places policy PL1.
I would like to make maybe further point, which is specifically for PL1. What I asked to add the paragraph that redevelopment of the State of Jersey or state-owned companies' land in town for purposes, if we are using, for the primary school estates, you need specific sites. Not every site would go. And we have state-owned land, and we have state-owned companies' land. We are talking about Andrew, we're talking about, yeah. So before we're signing off big developments at these areas, which will never come back if it will be built, we need to consider where the schools will go. So it is about the priorities, and it's come on the top of the best example. In 2017, it was clear that the police station site become available. If back in 2017 it would be considered that these sites can be redeveloped to the fire and ambulance station, by now we would have new fire and ambulance station, and we would have brand new school, or maybe in building brand new school for Rouge Bouillon, and we would sort out the state and the emergency services. Because it hasn't been prioritized, it hasn't been considered, it wasn't big in strategic viewing, now we have a housing development there, and we have a big conflict of interest between school and emergency services. So this is about strategic vision.
Okay, all right. I'm going to ask the states to respond.
Thank you,
Inspector. The allegation appears to be that you don't really take adequate account of the requirement of schools when you allow development.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we do absolutely agree with the Deputy that the needs of the education estate are of utmost significance to the island and the future of our children. I think one of the key things to recognise is not only have we undertaken a wholesale review of the island's infrastructure capacity, we've also worked with officers of children and young people education and skills and colleagues in responsible for the government property portfolio under the Minister for Infrastructure. So we've worked with them throughout the development of the island plan and are well aware of the education estate requirements. I think one of the main points to highlight when we're considering whether or not the plan is capable of delivering on the needs of the education estate is that these are built-up area sites, and under the Places chapter, they will provide for the needs of the estate to be met. I think what one of the Deputy's key issues may be around is how government deals with its own estate management, which is, of course, a responsibility for the Minister for Infrastructure.
And as I understand it, the response from your Minister is that really he doesn't want to have an absolute commitment to necessarily using sites that you own for education. He wants the flexibility of saying, well, what's the best use for this site, rather than have it reserved specifically for education. Is that right?
That is absolutely right, and I think we need to remember the context that we're in, that the Deputy does have a proposition that's been accepted by the Assembly to the same effect, but that proposition is finite in its duration, in that when the needs of the education estate are resolved in this period, that proposition will fall away, and the continued development of St Helier can continue, because at this moment in time, the development of key sites in St Helier are being paused, if you like, whilst the needs of the education estate are considered. To build that proposition, the effect of that proposition into the island plan could have a very negative effect on the future development of St Helier, particularly when temporary requirements do arise. Natasha Day, Senior Planning Policy Officer. Natasha Day.
Yes, I would like to comment because it's a big debate what sites are suitable, what sites are not suitable. The developments are continue. We recently have 2 big applications approved. The new applications gone in. So we're not really stopping development in St. Helier. But the moment that South Hill, for example, will go for the housing development, I have question mark where the school in south of town would go, or if Waterfront go into the big development. I'm not suggesting that this needs to be built there, but the consideration should be given.
I think we've explored that, and we can continue with the discussion when we deal with the infrastructure. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you very much. Association of Jersey Architects. Do we have the architects here? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, Inspector.
Thank you. You broadly support the place's policies, but you've got several issues that you've raised. You want, first of all, you want some other secondary centres defined so that they can benefit from the economic policies. But just looking at ER3, for example, it seems pretty flexible and seems to apply outside the main and secondary centres as defined. Is there actually a problem? And which centres do you want defined?
No, having heard submissions earlier, sorry, my name is Paul Harding, representing the Association of Jersey Architects. Having heard submissions earlier and considered this further, we don't really have a view about what other secondary centres could be added. So we would withdraw that one. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And you did talk about the Llanelwedd boundary to being too tightly drawn, and I wasn't sure if you were referring there to the town centre boundary or the centre boundary in Llanelwedd, or the boundary for the settlement as a whole.
Well, there's on the map included in the draft island plan, there is a sort of red hatched area, which is very tightly drawn around the existing commercial centres of Red Houses and Kennervay.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the boundary that you think is too tightly drawn?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay. And you were also concerned about PL5. You thought
Absolutely,
that might cause confusion. Don't you think, read as a whole, the plan makes a pretty clear distinction between these various areas?
Sorry, I don't agree, no. In fact, it's a completely retrograde step from the current 2011 as revised in 2014 Island Plan. In the current Island Plan, the green zone policy, there are 14 possible exceptions set out, which may be approved given other considerations being acceptable. And in the National Coastal Park, in the current Island Plan, there are 10 possible exceptions which may be approved. What we've got in this draft Bridging Island Plan is the green zone and National Coastal Park being combined. So we've got policy PL5 here that sort of covers both areas, and I think this is a confusion and is going to lead to lots of issues with uncertainty about outcomes of planning applications in future. We're going from a current plan which is very clear in what may be allowed as an exception to a policy PL5 which actually doesn't list any exceptions, or it just really lists the presumption against. And as Kevin Pilley mentioned earlier, PL5 sets a relatively low expectation of development. But how do we judge this? The planning officers aren't going to know. The people that actually have to apply the policy, they will have difficulties, and so will homeowners in the countryside. This is also combined with the expansion of the Coastal National Park into the interior agricultural plateau.
Yeah, we'll pick that up on.
Come on later. Yeah. But I think I would just draw your attention in the current island plan to page 87 in explanatory paragraphs 2.119 and 2.120, which accepts that the green zone, recognises the green zone as being a landscape that is lived in. That there are settlements we were talking about earlier right throughout the green zone, villages, small hamlets and such like. And contrast that with the approach in the draft Bridging Island plan, which doesn't really recognise that people live in the countryside in the green zone, and places virtually a high bar as the Coast National Park on any future development.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to ask the states to respond to that particular point. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, touching on the issue of the situation with regard to the development in the coast and the countryside, I think it's important to recognise that PL5 is an overarching policy that relates to the entire coast and countryside, and it's providing that strategic level view of what might be expected to occur and the nature of form and development in the throughout the coast and the countryside. I think it needs to be read in combination with the other detailed policies that are set out in the plan. So they are both thematic policies. So if you've got a proposal for residential development, you would need to look at the residential policies in the plan. If you've got a proposal that's related to employment land, you would check out the economy policies, and that would provide very clear parameters in terms of what's acceptable and what isn't relative to the development in the countryside. And then you would need to look at policies relating to the specific impact of a form of development. So you may need to look at the landscape impact and the policies related to protection of landscape. You may need to look at policies related to impact on travel and transport. So I think the policy regime provided by the draft plan is as comprehensive and as specified as it is in the current plan. It may just not be in the same place in terms of being in one policy.
Yeah, that's helpful. So do I understand it that the current plan has a lot of exceptions, and the bridging plan will also have exceptions, but you have to look in a different place for the exceptions?
That's exactly right, sir. I think if you look at the current plan, as Mr Harding referenced, the Green Zone policy and the Coastal National Park policy contain both spatial application and also thematic application within the same policy. Effectively, the draft plan disaggregates that, and the places policies provide that spatial dimension, and that's then provided with additional detail in the detailed policies depending on the theme of the particular proposal. So it's just a different construct in terms of how the policy works.
Okay. Mr Harding?
Well, I beg to differ, because I've searched through the whole draft Bridging Island plan looking for where the green zone words appear in the underlying detailed policies, and they don't, except for policy NE3 landscape and seascape character. So I'm left confused, you know, about what are the parameters in terms of what would be acceptable in the future in the green zone, what would be acceptable in the future in the Coast National Park. There is no definition of that.
Okay. Right, thank you. Yes, Mr.
Thank you, sir. Stephanie Steedman, K Planning. If I may, sir, and thank you to Mr Pilley for his clarification. Again, I'm repeating myself, as a practitioner who works regularly with people who live and work in the countryside, I'm looking for the words in the plan that help me understand how to guide them. And, sorry, this is a not tangential comment. It would be helpful if the plan had paragraph numbers. But
yeah, I agree with that.
I'm looking at page 74, near the top of the page, and it's the second paragraph down, where it is acknowledged that the coast and countryside are working environments, and the development of agriculture and other employment uses that support the rural and island economy will be enabled here. which is fine once I get to that point, but then it says where a countryside or coastal location is justified. Now, my understanding from that is that to be acceptable in a countryside location, you have to have a business that is related to the countryside or to the coast, and the reality in Jersey is very, very different. Our legacy of agricultural buildings, redundant agricultural buildings, provides the locations for many small local businesses, hauliers, workshops, storage, all of those, you know, the whole range of small business economic uses. And they have a really hard time operating in the countryside alongside people who are moving it in and are scrutinising what they're doing, how they're doing it, hours of operation, vehicle trips. And that is a real problem through the planning process. So more clarification, please, would be my request, and more support and a recognition that this binary view, which is, I don't mean to be facetious, but this binary view that the countryside is just a place where it looks green, but where is the work that supports all of that? That needs to be reflected and also supports the island's economy more broadly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. Mr. Harding, again, just your final question for you. The Sustainable Communities Fund. I'm not quite sure what the architects are saying. I know you don't like the 2021 viability work that's been done, but are you opposed in principle to the idea of a Sustainable Communities Fund?
Well, I think it's how it's applied is the big issue. Where development occurs, and there is a requirement for provision of other facilities, contributing towards the cost of that or paying for the cost of that is fine. But where development is being asked to pay for something that is not caused by the development, not required by the development, then that becomes a tax. And the Jersey construction industry is very high cost, mainly because of it being on island, we have to bring materials in, but it's exacerbated by the amount of levies and other hidden taxes that we have to pay. And we are concerned that a communities infrastructure fund is going to be used and make a lot of development unviable. So, if you want further detail on that, then I suggest you ask Litchfield. So.
Yeah, I'm sure Mr. Sp3 will have something to say about it this afternoon. So, based on what you've just told me about your views about it, if you were operating in England, would you be opposed to SIL?
Would I be opposed to?
SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, that's imposed in England.
Where it's required by the development, where there's a facility that is generated, a demand that's produced by the development, then that's fair enough. In other words, it's paying for something that's needed because the development is happening. But just a general levy, no, we would be
You're opposed to. Yeah. Okay. All right. We've dealt with Lekenove. I don't think we need to go into any more detail about that. States of Jersey Development Company. Yes, sir. I think your particular interest is the waterfront. Is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Sorry, my phone isn't on. I think your particular interest is the waterfront. And there are opportunity sites, as I understand it, in the framework for the area. Are you unhappy about what's in the plan, or do you want anything added to it?
No, we're happy, sir, with what's in the plan. Thank you.
Okay.
But yes, the waterfront is a major development opportunity site that obviously is centrally located in St Helier, so will provide for a very sustainable development in terms of transport links and access to amenities.
And what sort of timing are we talking about?
We're looking at submitting the outline application before the end of the year, with then a phasing plan incorporated, with the detailed planning applications coming forward, assuming consent is received in line with that phasing plan. We envisage the first units being developed or being ready for occupation in around 2026, 2027 through to 2031 as the final phase.
And can I just be clear, are these units of both residential and commercial accommodation?
The focus of the development, sir, is residential, so we're looking at around 1,000 new residential units. But as part of the plan, there is also proposals for a new sporting facility, as well as some art and culture activities at ground floor, food and beverage, and some additional commercial office buildings if there is the future requirement for such, given its proximity in the heart of the CBD.
Okay, all right. Is there anything else you want to add? You want to tell us?
No, thank you.
You happy? Good. Right. Is there anything else anybody else wants to tell? Yes, sir.
Ian Toozell. I've got a couple of comments on the definitions that are being used, particularly for PL3 local centres and PL4 smaller settlements.
Yeah.
And to quote from PL3, they are smaller urban centres where most of people's daily needs can be met within a short walk or cycle. Just wanted to comment that what people's daily needs are changes as you get older. Young people, it may just be a corner food shop, but as you get older, you probably would also appreciate things like a post office and a communal meeting point at the very least. In St John's, we have a village which has got multiple pub, restaurants, cafes, post office, food shops, etc. And it has a very central focal point, being a church, a shopping precinct, parish hall, primary school.
Yeah, I've walked around it, I've seen it, yeah.
It's no surprise, therefore, that we have a successful development for step-down housing and also for sheltered housing.
Yeah.
Zion Village has also been categorised as a PL3, but actually it's a PL4. It's a smaller settlement. It has one food shop, a couple of garages, that's it. There is no focal point, no central meeting point. It has a church, but that's as far as the community facilities go. So it was just to say that the definitions are fine as long as you realise they only work for younger residents.
Okay, right.
Therefore, the siting of any step-down housing or sheltered housing at Zion Village should not be considered if you're not going to put that vital infrastructure in place first.
Yep. Okay, we'll pick that up under the housing issue. Yeah.
Thank you. That's it for places.
Good. Thank you very much. Good. In that case, we're going to break for lunch, and we will see. Right. Yes, Mr. Gibb.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring up the matter of terminology, if this is the right part to do that, about the use of the words coastal national park.
No, probably not right, because that will be picked up under natural environment in detail. But if you want to make a point,
I wondered why you'd asked me.
Let's hear your point.
I wondered why you'd asked me. So because I've turned up because you've asked me.
Well, no, somebody requested that you come. We didn't specifically want you.
I wonder who that is.
You were told. You were clearly told to come by somebody. So, let's.
You're very welcome.
Make your point.
In that case, I'm
dealing with the natural environment session on Thursday morning, so perhaps say what you wanted to say, and then we can perhaps deal with it then. Or
right. Thank you for the opportunity. The St Martin's Conservation Trust is obviously based in St Martin's, which is one of the parishes. The extension of the Coastal National Park affects that parish quite considerably, in that large amounts of it would become part of the coastal national park. There's grave concern about the use of the words national park, and this is based on experience within the parish during lockdown, where there is a fear that the use of the term national park might encourage people to believe that it is like an English national park, and therefore there is rights of access which don't actually exist. It seems there is support, however, for the general strengthening of controls. There is not an issue about that. And therefore, it's a simple point to make, which could another phrase be used, such as area of outstanding natural beauty, for example, as exists in England, rather than the words national park. This is compounded by the problem that there isn't actually such a thing as a national park in law here, in the manner of an English national park. And so I think it just leads to confusion and fear and discontent in the parish of St Martin.
Yes, fine, okay. I'm going to park that until Thursday morning because you've raised actually 2 or 3 issues which are on the agenda for then in terms of the legal status of the national park, and actually I'm very interested to hear what the state's current position is with regard to that, because there's an alternative proposal that's been put forward that we need to explore. So, fine, I hear. Are you able to come on Thursday morning?
I am.
Great.
Yes.
Well, in fact, please come.
I can come and say it all again.
Contribute, because
yeah.
I think that's definitely where we should be dealing with that one. Okay.
Good, thank you.
Right, before we finish the session, can I just ask the states if you want to pick up anything about any of the major strategic issues that we discussed this morning? Or are you content?
Perhaps just one minor point of clarification, which you may already have made yourself, just going back to the point of the Association of Jersey Architects and their comments made about the Sustainable Communities Fund, and that should be based on an impact relating to that development. Just to clarify that there is an existing mechanism for value capture in Jersey, or cost recovery and kind of managing impact development, which is planning obligation agreements, which is explained in the plan. The Sustainable Communities Fund is something distinctly different, and yes, may be considered more like a tax.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that won't make Mr. Harding any happier, but it does clarify the point very clearly. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you, or those of you who are coming back, at 2 o'clock.